Okay guys, so a perfect example of when studio executives realize how badly they've messed up a movie. Release the movie on Blu-ray and give us an unrated cut with 30 extra minutes of footage to try to get us to see the movie in a different light and say, yeah, we messed up, but you know what? Let's fix what we messed up. Perfect example right there. So guys, what's going on? What's up? It's Autobot Mike 18 here, back with another discussion video? I was going to say movie review, but this really isn't a movie review. This is more so a slightly, I'm probably going to put spoilers in the title of this video because I am going to delve into spoilers. But this is more so a spoiler-based discussion on the Ultimate Edition or the unrated cut of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. That's right, guys. I finally watched the unrated cut of Batman v Superman on Blu-ray. If you watched my Blu-ray review for this movie, I said in that video that I didn't want to leave my updated thoughts on the movie yet because I had not yet seen the unrated cut. I watched the unrated cut over this weekend. I watched it Saturday morning, like in the early morning at like 2 a.m. and I finished it at 5:30 in the morning. Yeah. But I did not fall asleep. I stood awake and watched this entire thing from beginning to end. I was like wired. I was wide awake. And now I want to give you guys my thoughts on whether or not I feel that they fixed things with the unrated cut of this movie. Is anything actually really different? I want to touch upon these questions in this video. Is anything actually really different? Did they actually make improvements, or did they just throw more action into the movie just to cloud our judgment? Which cut would I suggest you guys watch? The unrated cut or the theatrical version? Note, this release includes both of them. So I'm going to touch upon those things, guys. So this isn't your straightforward review. This is more so like a spoiler discussion of my thoughts on the changes and everything. So definitely, if you haven't seen Batman v Superman at all, don't watch this video until you've watched either the theatrical or unrated cut of the movie. Then once you have, come back and listen to me either rave or rant about this. So guys, I'm not going to talk about what I loved that made Batman v Superman good the first time I saw it. I also want to strongly preference that when I going into this discussion. Okay, I loved Batman. I loved Ben Affleck as Batman. The overall cast in general was cool. The action was cool. The shots looked great. The explosions and fight choreography looked cool for the most part. I'm not going to get into all that stuff again. I want to get into problems I had with the movie, whether or not they are addressed or fixed with this unrated cut. So that's what I'll get into. And I also, before I get into my thoughts on the changes, I just want to preface this. Guys, we all have opinions, okay? This is one of the most polarizing movies of the year, no questions asked. It might even be the most polarizing film of 2016. I really think it is. People either love it and people either hate it. And if you're on the side that loves it and you watched my review, then you probably weren't happy. Or if you watched my Blu-ray unboxing. A lot of people, yeah, I've taken shit from not liking this movie. Guys, we all have different opinions. If we all had the same opinion, the world would suck, okay? So if I don't like this movie, don't kill me. If other people love this movie, everybody who hates it, don't kill them, because that's how they feel about the movie. So I just wanted to preference that. But that's how it is with every movie review or anything like that. So guys, Batman v Superman. What are the obvious changes that are in this movie? Well, for starters, we get a lot more of Henry Cavill not being Superman, but being Clark Kent and investigating victims of Batman's bat branding spree, okay? So we got a lot more of that, a lot more scenes of just Superman maybe going to, or Clark Kent going to like lower middle class people who are severely being affected by Batman and his bat branding. He's scaring the crap out of them. And we have a much clearer idea of what Superman was of why Clark Kent does not like Batman, okay? Because that was one thing that was so clear with Batman v Superman, the theatrical cut, why Batman was against Superman. But we really didn't get why Superman didn't like Batman. We were all like, why? Because he's got to go save Martha? Is that the only reason why they're going to fight? You know, it didn't really clearly make all that much sense. And I think that was not only my problem, one of my problems with Batman v Superman, but a lot of other people felt the same exact way. It was something we all missed, but it wasn't our fault. It was the filmmakers. So those scenes are in this movie now, giving us an idea of why Clark Kent is against Batman and how he deals with people, essentially. So that is in this movie. There's scenes of that. There's a lot other scenes of Lois Lane trying to find out what's really going on. There's an opening scene set in Africa, and Superman gets blamed for an explosion and murdering people, but he can't make people explode or shoot them, so that doesn't make much sense. But regardless of that, there's a lot more of Lois Lane investigating into that, investigating into bullets, and there's scenes with her, and Jenna Malone was never in the theatrical cut at all, and now she's in this movie in the unrated cut. She's playing like this other person who's investigating thing. I don't know. She works in a lab and just looks at shit. That's her character. And there's a few other scenes. There's another character that we focused on a lot more that I thought worked, an African villager, and she may be tied into Lex Luthor's plan somehow. So there's a lot of other scenes of that. There's a few other shots like Ben Affleck's ass in the shower, because that is needed, of course. And I think they just made it more violent, okay? Like maybe they showed more violence than they originally did in the theatrical cut, because this cut is actually rated R. So those are the main changes. There's no real changes to the fight scenes, and I'm glad they didn't just throw on a lot more of action. However, that said, I actually kind of wish I got a little bit more of the Batman and Superman fight, because watching it again this time on the Blu-ray, it's only like 6 minutes long. Like, I really wanted more. I mean, it's cool and badass, but I wouldn't have been happy, I wouldn't have been mad at all had they thrown on an extra 3 minutes or so just for the fighting part of the movie, which doesn't happen until about 2 hours in, but I'll get into that. So that's kind of the same drawback at the same time when we get an unrated cut. By unrated cut, yeah, it's rated R, and there's more scenes with villagers, but there's not really much more action. Not saying that's a bad thing. It could be or it could not be. Now, here's the thing with the theatrical versus unrated cut. I'm going to just go out on a limb and say this. The unrated cut is without a doubt better than the theatrical version. The theatrical version, looking at it now, is bad. It's even worse than I thought it was. And I'll tell you guys why in a little bit, but the unrated cut finally answered those questions that we all had throughout the movie the first time we watched it with the theatrical cut. And the other thing with the unrated cut that worked a lot better was that I finally had a better idea of who Lex Luthor was as a villain. That was another one of my biggest complaints. His plan, not only did I not even get everything the first time I saw this movie, but I didn't realize that half of the things that happen in this movie are because of Lex Luthor, and I realized that in the unrated cut because we get scenes of Lois Lane figuring this stuff out. Did they focus too much on Lois Lane? Yes, I'll get into that. But I mean, at least I got a more idea because I just thought that stuff was in the movie. Like, I never understood the first time I watched this movie why they focused so much on that first scene in Africa and Superman getting framed for killing people. I didn't know that that was connected to Lex Luthor in any way. All of Lois Lane's scenes investigating that bullet thing, yeah, there's too much of that. They focus way too much on her and should focus more on Batman and Superman. That said, at least it makes more sense to me now with this unrated cut. So a lot more things are explained and do make sense. Now, guys, does that answer the question, this question, does that make Batman v Superman a better movie? Well, not exactly. Because, guys, when you look at it this way, you can add as many scenes as you want. And this is just my opinion. A lot of people may give this movie a positive grade now after having seen the unrated cut and saying, oh yeah, that worked for me, that makes more sense, that's all I needed, that's it. For me, still doesn't work for me in that way. I still think this movie is a mess. It's a lot less incoherent than I originally thought it was. But I still think it's a mess. I still think they had way too many things to juggle with this movie. Way too many characters that they just couldn't properly balance the screen times right. And you know what? That's not even the argument that I'm going to say that they had too many characters. Because they didn't have as many characters as a movie like X-Men Apocalypse or Civil War did, comparing it to other comic book movies. This movie probably has less characters, but the problem is it doesn't know how to balance the screen time for these characters. The major conflict at hand here is Batman and Superman. Look at the title of the Blu-ray, guys. That's the title of the movie, Batman v Superman. But when you add so many extra scenes of Lois Lane investigating a rubber bullet or Lois Lane trying to figure things out, I get it. It's a sequel to Man of Steel this movie works as a sequel to Man of Steel. That said, this is a Batman and Superman movie. That is where the conflict is most interesting. And when you have scenes like that that just sort of sway away from the main point and the main conflict at hand of the movie, your movie doesn't really work that well. And that's where my problems still lie with this movie. Now, my biggest problem, I think, is to not add scenes to make things make more sense, because that helps this movie a lot. My problem that still stands with this movie is that there's so many scenes that were in the theatrical cut that are also in this cut that just don't need to be there at all for any reason. My head is still, I know the only reason why some of these scenes are here. It is for setting up future movies, and that's where Batman v Superman goes wrong. Its narrative does not have a clear focus on the main conflict at hand, because we have to get time for Justice League setup, Batman having pointless nightmares that I could totally would be fine if I just watched them in the deleted scenes of the Blu-ray, giving us Wonder Woman, and although I loved Wonder Woman in this movie, she's hardly in it. She has no real place other than to come in the final fight, or for her to get an email with the whereabouts of certain Justice League members and setting up the Justice League movie. That is the point of these scenes. If you cut them out of the movie, and this is why I know that they don't need to be there, they would make no difference. It wouldn't change the movie at all, because they don't tie into the main narrative at all. Another scene that totally does not need to be in this movie is that whole scene where Clark Kent goes to visit he goes into like the icy Alps or whatever. I don't know. He's somewhere in the Arctic. I don't know. And Kevin Costner's there chopping up wood. I get it. They wanted to bring him back. This is a Man of Steel sequel. I get that. But that scene could have entirely been removed from the movie. It would have made no difference whatsoever. The only thing is that Superman was being frowned upon because of the court hearing explosion. Okay, which I still think is one of the best moments of this whole movie. Totally didn't see it coming, and I love the build-up to that scene a lot more now in this unrated cut, because I understand about things tying into Lex Luthor's plan now a lot more. But then Superman, people are saying, what if he was involved in that explosion somehow? Or what if he saved the people somehow? So then he goes away and he has the scene with Kevin Costner. I just would not have had him in the movie. I would have just cut that scene out and cut the runtime off. There are still so many scenes in this movie that you could just cut out and make now the unrated cut, which is now 3 hours long, by the way. You can make it 20 minutes shorter if you cut out all the crap with the Justice League. The whole email scene could have gone, and they could have replaced it with some other way of Wonder Woman going into this battle somehow. It would have been so much better than the crappy setup that we get with just emails with logos. Like, who took the time to make these damn logos for the freaking... Why? It's just been cut out. Batman's nightmare was cool because he took on soldiers, and it was a one take, and it looked awesome. Yes, it did. But it has no place in this movie whatsoever. It's just taking up the runtime at this point and doesn't add anything to there's 2 or 3 dreams in this movie. The whole thing with the Flash coming in during Batman's nightmare, which is a nightmare within a nightmare, that could have been entirely cut out. It just doesn't make sense. The whole beginning with Batman's first nightmare, where the monster comes out of the coffin of Martha Wayne, that totally could have been cut out. Made 0 sense to me at all. Also, had no place in this movie. We needed even more of Lex Luthor, because even after things have been explained to me better, Lex Luthor's plan is still a convoluted mess. I'm just sitting there like, I don't understand everything. Did he want Batman to go take the kryptonite spear? Did he really want Batman to steal that? If that's the one thing that could stop Superman, then why would he go and make Doomsday, which is just going to could possibly end up killing them both? Why the kryptonite spear? Why is Doomsday even necessary, other than the fact that they have to have a big fight with someone in the end of the movie? It just doesn't make sense to me at all. His plan is so over intricate and has so many steps to it that most of those steps could have easily just been cut entirely out of this movie, and it would have made no difference at all. Like, you just sit down, and an easy 3 or 4 step plan with not that much involved into it, like, other than obviously it making sense, is important to the main story of this movie, which is Batman and Superman and their conflict. Because I probably said this in my review, I'll say it again here. The best component of this movie, yes, it's Batman, but it also, for me, because of how great the opening scene is why Batman doesn't trust Superman, or why he doesn't believe in Superman, or why he believes he's a threat to humans. Because of all the destruction he caused that personally affected him in the beginning of the movie. With Wayne Tower being destroyed, him losing a lot of people that he knew in his business, and yeah, that's why it was so good for me. It perfectly described to me the motives and the actions of Batman, and it made me, for the rest of the movie, I was like, this is why Batman's doing this. This is why Batman doesn't trust Superman. I got it from that opening scene. That's one of my favorite scenes of this whole movie. That said, guys, Batman v Superman, it's fun to watch. The action is here and far between, though, with this new unrated cut, because there's so many scenes prior to the 2-hour mark of this movie that are now thrown into the movie that do make the narrative make more sense, but it takes longer to get to the conflict. So, you see, that's where the problems are. However, if you do what I said and cut out all the meat, all the fat of this movie that doesn't need to be there, Justice League setup, nightmare sequences, that whole thing with Jimmy Olsen could have entirely still been cut out. I still don't feel it has any relevance whatsoever. All that stuff, cut it all out, and it would have made the movie that much better, and we would have gotten to the fight quicker and the conflict at hand a lot quicker. And ultimately, guys, I do enjoy this cut more. But I was thinking about this as I was watching the movie. Here's where I stand on Batman v Superman and even the DC Extended Universe moving forward. I want to talk about that for a second because this is important. This is DC's future here. And I honestly feel that if they continue to do what they did with Batman v Superman, it's not going to work right. Here's what happened, guys. Now, I know everybody's going to call me out here, Marvel fanboy, Mike, what's up with you in Marvel? Are they paying you or something? No, they're not paying me or anything like that. Oh, I wish. But no, they're not. Here's where I stand, guys. DC is trying to set up their own universe just like Marvel did. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. Go ahead. You have your own comic book characters. Go do that. There's nothing wrong with that. I see nothing wrong with that at all. Here's where they went wrong. Marvel took the time to set up their universe. They started in 2008 and they didn't bring the Avengers together until 2012. 4 years later, they brought them together on the screen and they gave us 5 movies in the meantime. 2 Iron Man movies, a Hulk, Thor, and Captain America movie to all give us an idea and look into those characters. Batman v Superman, this is how it's going. They gave us Man of Steel in 2013, and 3 years later, they don't release any other movie. No Batman origin movie, no Man of Steel 2. Instead, they cram all of that into this one movie that should just be about Batman and Superman and their fight and Lex Luthor pitting them against each other. But instead, this movie, it has to be Man of Steel 2. It has to set up Batman, his origin in the beginning of the movie, which I hate how they did it in this movie. Has to set all of that up. It has to also set up the Justice League, because Justice League is coming out in a year from now, 2017. Justice League is coming out. Push that movie back to 2019 because they're not ready. I honestly do not think they're ready. We didn't even get a Flash movie yet, or a Cyborg movie, none of that, nor our Aquaman, nothing. The only movie we're getting before Justice League is Wonder Woman, and that is it. Then we're right into Justice League. So because of that, this movie has to then have all those scenes, which could easily be cut out and just put in the deleted scenes, or even in the post-credits, all that Justice League setup. And that's what this movie became concerned about in those scenes, setting up a franchise, setting up the Justice League, and that's why Batman v Superman didn't work. What they should have done to fix these mistakes, Man of Steel should have came out. Man of Steel 2 should have been released sometime in 2015 or even this year, 2016, and just focused on Batman and Lois Lane and maybe set up Lex Luthor in that movie. Then, at some point, either a year before or a year after, we get a Batman origin movie, or even during the same year. Why the hell not? I don't know how Suicide Squad is going to tie into Justice League. I'm assuming it will, but I don't know. That said, like, we should have gotten a Batman origin movie, Man of Steel 2, and then maybe in those movies we have little scenes that don't detract from the main story at hand. Literally, Wonder Woman reads that email, the scene literally right before Batman and Superman start fighting. She reads that email. Their whole fight has been built up this whole movie, and then we have that scene and she has to read their files, and then we literally cut right to Batman on the roof waiting for Superman to show up, and they're gonna fight because Lex Luthor has Martha. That is what happens in this movie. That's what happened. That was their decision, and it was very, very, very poor in my mind. But now we're getting a Justice League movie before we even get Flash, Cyborg, and their own movies. And I'm not going to care at all about those characters in the Justice League movie unless that movie's like 4 hours long, because it'll, finally give me time to care about these characters. They have no other movies to set them up and make them important and make me see who they are as people, not just cardboard, cookie-cutter, two-dimensional characters in a movie. And that is why where DC is going with this, it's not working. And that's why Batman v Superman didn't work. This was a movie I wanted to love. It was like my 4th or 5th highest anticipated movie of this year. I wanted to really love this movie, but the studio got in the way and they interfered because they want to catch up to Marvel and make $1 billion with Justice League as soon as they can without taking the time and taking a few years to set up the movies, set up the characters, set up the antagonist. And instead of doing that, like Marvel did, they are just going to cram all of this stuff into Batman v Superman and Justice League, and we're not going to care. It's going to be ridiculous and messy, just like Batman v Superman. Now, I hope I'm wrong. I really hope that Justice League is better than this, and it's not a giant mess. That that movie has enough screen time with its characters and makes me spend enough time with those characters to actually care about them. I don't know. I think they were poorly set up in this movie. I don't know where DC is going, where they're looking to go moving forward. Guys, that's where I stand with Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice and the DC Universe as a whole. I honestly feel that they're not doing it right and they messed up from the beginning, and that's why I wasn't a huge fan of Batman v Superman. I really think that things could have been fixed, and I don't know where they're going to go moving forward. I really don't. I honestly think, had they cut that stuff out of the unrated cut, like I just said, and put that in the deleted scenes category of the special features of the Blu-ray, I honestly think I would have loved the movie much, much more than I actually did. And guys, again, it comes down to, I'm just not into this, okay? I am going to bump my score up. I think I gave this like a 7 out of 10. I'll go 7.5 because they actually gave me a reason why Superman was doing what he was doing, why Lex Luthor was doing what he was doing, and I finally buy into that way more than I did in the theatrical cut. So for that reason, I'm bumping this score up to just a solid grade of a C, but that's where I stand, and nothing is going to change my mind on that grade. I'm sorry if a lot of you were hoping that I would love the movie more. I couldn't get into it because it's so messy and is so convoluted with Lex Luthor's plan, and it's just so crazy hell-bent on setting up this franchise. It doesn't know what movie it wants to be. Like, they even didn't know what to call this movie, Batman v Superman or Dawn of Justice, so they just called it both. That alone is a perfect example of just why it didn't work for me. So guys, there you have it. Those are my thoughts, my updated thoughts on Batman v Superman. Yes, there are some things about it that worked more, but as a whole, in general, I think a lot more could have been done and a lot more could have been fixed and cut out of the movie. So guys, that said, what are your thoughts on Batman v Superman still, if you have seen the unrated cut? If you have not seen the unrated cut yet, what do you look forward to it? If you have, I want to know your guys' thoughts on the movie. Did it make the movie better for you, or did it not really do anything for you? Guys, as always, I thank you so much for watching my videos. I really appreciate it. Comment below. If you want to kill me down below, have at it. Guys, I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye.